Let's say, for example, you have an interest in history, but not just history, but French history. But not just French history, you have an interest in Napoleon Bonaparte. And not just Napoleon Bonaparte, but the clothes that Napoleon Bonaparte wore. I mean, you're really focused on this. You have an area of expertise that is kind of, well, it's kind of unique. I mean, maybe there's 2 or 3 people on the planet that share your interest. Well, that's an indication because of your specific area of expertise. You might be autistic. That's one of many characteristics, and of course, just one doesn't make you autistic. Number 2, we've got 18 of these. Number 2 is you avoid crowds. Most people who have Asperger syndrome or who are autistic prefer not to be around people because, well, we have this thing that's called mind blindness. That is, we don't understand social interactions. We don't know how that works. We walk into a room, we see people just naturally interacting, having a good time, usually having a good time, unless you walk in a barroom fight. But outside of that, you wonder, how do they do this? How do they know? I mean, even if they are having a barroom fight, you don't totally understand, well, why are they fighting? You just don't get it. So that is called avoiding crowds because you don't understand the social dynamics. Number 3 is, have you ever been called shy? Have you ever been called a loner? Have you been called shy and a loner multiple times when you were a child and a teenager and even into early adulthood and maybe beyond? They say, this guy, he gets off by himself. He doesn't socialize much. They just seem to notice that. And it's not just 1 or 2 people, but it's kind of a general perception of how you are. That's an indicator that you may have autism because, well, you don't socialize. Number 3 is you just don't get it. I mean, socializing, you just don't understand it. Now, we just touched on that a moment ago, right? You don't understand how it works. It's kind of like there is a foreign language that is being spoken and you don't understand that foreign language. But what's more is you see people's mouths moving. They're speaking a foreign language, but you don't hear the sound. So there's something going on. They hear it, but you can't hear it, so you can't participate. But that's kind of what it's like not to be able to get socializing. It's a foreign language, and you can't even hear it, let alone try to understand it, so you just can't learn it. It's something they know, you don't know. You can kind of mimic. Yeah, you can move your mouth like they're moving their mouths, and you come across looking silly. That is to say, you can kind of mimic socializing, but people catch on really, really quick. Number 5 is you feel sorry for people who are alone or people you perceive who are lonely. So let's say you're a high school student and you walk into a cafeteria and you don't like this place. If it were up to you, you'd go home and eat, or you'd go outside and eat. And maybe you do if your school allows that. But you see another student, and that student is sitting all alone in the cafeteria. You feel sorry for that person because you have that level of empathy that says, I know what it's like to be in that person's place. Number 6 is you don't have too many friends. Now, most people with Asperger syndrome do have a circle of friends. They don't mind having friends. But if they do have friends, those friends are very loyal, or at least the person with Asperger syndrome is very loyal to his or her friends. So people with lots and lots and lots of friends, those are extroverts. Almost never are those people autistic, but there are exceptions rather. Number 7. You hope that guy doesn't talk to you. What guy is that? Well, that's any guy. I mean, that person, maybe taking a walk somewhere and you see a neighbor ahead and you're hoping that person doesn't see you because you really don't like making small talk. Or you're in the grocery store like 3 in the morning when no one else is there because you don't want to make contact with people, and you see somebody. Good grief, there's another shopper at 3 in the morning, and you hope they don't say anything to you like hi or good morning. You just don't like that small talk. You could be autistic. Number 8, if other people say that you are ill-mannered. Now remember we said that you just don't get social settings. Well, guess what? People don't get you either. They think that you are aloof because you don't talk to them. Now, they don't understand that on some level you may even be terrified. It's not that you're aloof, that you have this inner fear of this lack of self-confidence. And they misread that, so they think you're ill-mannered, and you may do things that other people don't do, say things that other people don't say. For example, you may talk too loud when you do bother to talk, or you talk so quiet they can't hear you. Or maybe your table manners that you never learned. Most people with autism have good table manners, I gotta say. But for example, if someone hasn't taught you those things, how would you know them? You tend not to learn so much from observation as being taught because you don't socialize. Number 9 is you know too much about a topic. That's kind of like number 1, but for example, we were talking about Napoleon before, but for example, you may know something about the Civil War. You may know something about American history, but there may be some aspect of the Civil War that you really zero in on. And not only do you know too much about that topic, and I find myself doing this all the time. You talk about it. I mean, you never talk about anything, hardly ever, except your topic of interest, and that you won't shut up about. So maybe you're into politics, and you won't shut up about this particular political view or this particular political candidate. Or maybe you're into some kind of religion, and, it's interesting to you, so you just assume it's interesting to everybody else. And most people will sit back quietly and tolerate your rambling on about whatever your thing is. I mean, they're kind of astounded just to hear you talk in the first place. So if you are knowing too much about a topic, there's a possibility that that could be the result of autism. Number 10, you know you're different. You know you're very different. Most people that I know with Asperger syndrome say they knew from, like first, second grade, maybe even before kindergarten. They knew they were different because they walk into a classroom and the other kids were talking with each other and playing and doing whatever kids do. And somehow they didn't, like we said earlier, they just didn't get it. So they realized there was something different. They didn't know they were autistic. I mean, I didn't know. I had Asperger syndrome for decades. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know it was a thing. I heard of it, but it never occurred to me to even research it, find out what it was. But once I did, I said, man, that's describing me. Well, age 65, guess what? Went in to a therapist who specializes in autism and Asperger syndrome, and I was evaluated. Went in for several sessions, by the way, to make sure we got it right. And sure enough, I checked just about every single box. By the way, I'm pushing 70 years old. I've learned a thing or two over these past decades, and I'm just trying to share with you some of the things that I've learned maybe can help you along the way. Number 11. You are frequently left out of social settings. Notice there seems to be this recurring theme of inability to socialize. So if you find yourself being left out, maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, it's as if people are trying to get away from you, or they're trying to get you away from them. It's one or the other, and sometimes both at the same time. So, these people are uncomfortable with you. They find it kind of weird. Sometimes they say you're a space alien or something like that. I recall when I was in high school, some guy asked me, are you serious? He said, are you on drugs? No, this is the way I behave. I actually didn't say that, but that's what I thought. But I recall being in a music class, and the teacher noticed that I wasn't as animated as the other participants. Small class, only 8 students. And his solution was to get me to stand up and, kind of walk around and act silly, kind of dance around. I refused to do it because, it's silly. I'm not going to do that. People misunderstand you, and consequently, you get left out of a lot of things. That's really troublesome, particularly when you're in school and you want to participate. Number 12, if you find yourself being lonely. When you're alone, it's natural to be lonely. And with a person with Asperger syndrome or autism, Asperger syndrome, as you know, is high-functioning autism. But sometimes the loneliest place on the planet is when you're with a group. And sometimes the place where you feel most comfortable It's when you are home, safe, secure, and all by yourself. Number 13, we mentioned earlier, if you are loyal to those few friends that you have. That's a good chance that you may have Asperger syndrome or broader autism. Why is that? Well, because you value friends, because you know they're hard to come by. Anything that's difficult to come by has a higher value. And to you, friends are, well, they're hard to come by, so they have a high value. Number 14 is you tend to overstimulate. What is stimulating or stimming, they call it for short? That's where you engage in repetitive behavior. Everybody does it. Doesn't mean that you're autistic, but people with autism tend to overdo it. So, for example, let's say that you sit down in a rocking chair. Chances are you immediately are going to start stimming. It doesn't matter if you are autistic or not. Virtually everybody does it. Sit down in a swing, port swing, whatever, you start swinging. That is a form of stimming. Again, everybody does it to some degree. Maybe you're tapping your fingers or cracking your knuckles. Extreme cases, people start flapping. Some people walk around in circles. That is to say, they pace back and forth. Those are all forms of stimming. And if you do that all the time, if you're excessive, there's a sign that maybe, just maybe, you have autism. Number 15 is you like to read the encyclopedia.
I read the encyclopedia.
Okay, I don't think anyone has encyclopedias anymore, but back in the day, everyone had at least one set of encyclopedia. Now, granted, they may have been 20, 30 years old by the time we got to them because, you don't buy a new set every time they publish them. They're expensive, or they were. It cost hundreds of dollars even back then. But you just enjoyed reading something new. Now, there were some people who would read the whole set of encyclopedias. I mean, we're talking, 20 books, 20 thick books in a set. Well, anymore, we don't do that, but people will go to Wikipedia, and they'll just randomly read articles because, well, they think it's interesting. That stimulates their mind. And people with Asperger syndrome and autism, it's kind of like, they need that self-stimulation. So if you enjoy reading random articles on Wikipedia, or maybe you're watching random videos on YouTube, that's an indication that maybe you have autism or Asperger syndrome. Number 16, if you are into routines. It's got to be done the same way every time, preferably. Now, you may not be married to these routines, but you're a whole lot better off with them. I think most everybody has some kind of routine. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you shave, you do whatever you do. But if you have a set of routines, maybe it's narrowed down to even you plan what you eat every day. That is an indication that you have autism, that you have Asperger syndrome. The best friend, the best invention ever for people with Asperger syndrome is the spreadsheet, because we love to put things in columns. We love to have them organized. We find it more efficient to get things done in an orderly manner. So if you're orderly, got your clothes in the closet? Are they in order? Do you fold your underwear? You might be autistic. I'm just saying, you like things in order, you like routines. Number 17 is you are sensitive to certain sounds, fabrics, and that type of stimulation. So we just said, people with Asperger syndrome like stimulation of certain kinds, but others, the other extreme. We just don't like it. People with Asperger syndrome and autism, they find certain fabrics horribly uncomfortable. When I was a kid, my mom made me wear a white shirt every Sunday, made me wear black pants every Sunday. It was like wearing clothes made out of sandpaper with the sand turned on the inside. It was miserable. And you go to church in the middle of the summer, it's hot outside. Because back then, late 50s, early 60s, air conditioning, it was very rare. We went to church, didn't have air conditioning. No church had air conditioning. Cars didn't have air conditioning, with few exceptions. Businesses didn't have air conditioning. They had fans, they had windows, they had screens. That's how you stayed cool in the summertime. And to put on those sandy, sandpaper clothes, man, that was miserable. And another thing, haircuts. Geez, that drove me crazy. I didn't understand it. I think I was the only boy that I knew that found haircuts miserable. And the reason is, when you get your haircut, you get those tiny little hairs all over you. and they would scratch and they would itch. I mean, they were so miserable. I didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know I had Asperger syndrome. I just thought tiny little hairs were annoying, and I couldn't understand why I was the only one. Why is it that all of these other boys would go to church wearing sandpaper clothes, and I was the only one that found it miserable and couldn't get home to get out of that and into my corduroys or my blue jeans or my flannel shirt or whatever I wore back then, something that was actually comfortable on your skin. And those little tags, I don't know if they still have those or not, the little tags on the back of the t-shirt, those are the worst nightmare for people with Asperger syndrome. They just don't like that. Number 18 is you have siblings who are autistic. You have family members, maybe mom and dad are autistic. You may not know they're autistic. You may not know they have Asperger syndrome, but you can see if they have traits or not. And you can tell, well, there's a good likelihood that they do. Now, I had a sister 2 years older than me, almost certainly was autistic, almost certainly had Asperger syndrome. But, she was never, she never went to a therapist and had it analyzed. So, but I could just, I just remember, she died 35 years ago, but I could just remember the way that she was, and the way she was pretty much the same way I was. So she probably had autism. Were there others in our family? Maybe aunts, uncles, cousins that I didn't know about. So who knows? But that's a good indication that you have Asperger syndrome. Okay, those are 18 things. Am I missing anything? If I am, you feel free to put something in the comment section and let me know how many of these you checked off and what do you think. Now, if you think you may be on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, my suggestion is consider going to a qualified, emphasis on qualified therapist and have it checked out. Find out for certain. Why not? All you got to lose is, well, if there's a fee involved, there's that to lose. But outside of that, it's, my opinion, it's well worth it. See those two rectangles on the screen? If you enjoy what you heard, want to hear more, all you got to do, click one of those two rectangles and we will continue our conversation. If not, thanks for stopping by and we'll see y'all next time.